Hi, my name is Paul Grogan and welcome to episode 64 of the Gaming Rules podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Kathleen Mercury and the topic of discussion is dealing with difficult gamers. As always, thank you very much to all of my Patreon supporters who help keep the show going. If you do enjoy the show and other content that I produce, then please consider supporting me over at patreon.com. Even just $1 a month really does help. And also a special shout out to the Board Game Trading and Chat UK Facebook group, who posed a lot of the questions that we talked about in this episode. The other thing I wanted to mention at the start is that unfortunately for the first 15 minutes, the audio quality from my side of things is not perfect, as I was having trouble with the microphone. That clears up about 15 minutes, but apologies in advance for that. So let's get on with the show. So a very warm welcome to the show, Kathleen Mercury.
Good morning.
And how are you today?
I'm very well. It's early here, but anything for you, darling. Anything for you.
Thank you very much. So what I like to do normally with my podcast guests is, before we jump into the topic of discussion, just find out a little bit more about yourself, who you are, where you live, and what you do.
Oh, okay. My name's Kathleen Mercury. I live in the smack dab of the U.S., St. Louis, Missouri. There's the Big Arch, if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. That's about 10 minutes from my house. I teach middle school gifted kids, so they're in my class because of their high IQ. And I teach game design with them. I do game design, and now I'm doing RPG design with my students. And I also run a very active game club. In addition to that, I host the podcast Games in Schools and Libraries. I'm a contributor to some other ones on a semi-infrequent basis. And I also do game design myself, and I like to work at cons. I like to go to cons. So any avenue in which I can participate in the gaming world, I try very hard to do so.
Yes, because I've seen you at a few cons.
Oh, absolutely.
And then I just thought, oh, that's Kathleen, and I got introduced to you, and you were playing some games. And then I saw that you were pitching one of your games that you designed to a company as well. So you do game design. Tell us a bit about that. Have you had the game picked up?
Yeah. So I had my boyfriend and I, one game we did together, we got signed. And then that's when we actually just got the rights back, and that we are reworking and going to be repitching. So I'm actually really excited. It's an interesting process. You know, it's not usual to happen this way, but it's actually been really good because we've had a year away from it, and you really have fresh perspective. You're like, why did we do that? We can make this so much better. So it's kind of cool. And then the other game that I currently have signed is with Colossal Games. It's a dexterity scenario based games on dragons.
Okay.
Firebombing.
Yeah, that's the one I remember.
Yeah. It was pigeons. Now it's dragons firebombing villages, and it's called Dragnarok. But I do love that it's scenario based, so it's dexterity, but there's all different types of different challenges in terms of what you're trying to do, all different types of dexterity actions, and cool. I have just as much fun with it now as I did, when I first started working on it like 8 years ago, and back when it was pigeons. Good
sign of a game. So just going back to the teaching then, you said that you teach gifted kids, because my partner's mum teaches at a special school, and she teaches, or she helps out teaching. She's like an assistant, but she teaches kids who are performing a lot better than their age, but also the other end of the spectrum as well. But you just do the one end, do you? Right.
Yeah, it depends on the state, but in Missouri, gifted is not considered part of special education for kids who tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum, although I do have kids who qualify for both. I have kids who have special needs in addition to being gifted.
Right.
And that can that's a whole other it's really interesting, and every child is so incredibly different. There's no, catch-all, one-size-fits-all approach to working with these kids, which is one of the things I like about it. Even just for my kids who are only gifted, they have their own kind of set of interesting abilities, skills, difficulties, and challenges. And quite honestly, there's a huge overlap with gamers. And a lot of what I see with my students, I see with gamers that I play with, because gamers want to do fun, intellectual things and for their recreation, and that's what my students like to do. So there's no real surprise there. So the students, they have to qualify for the program. They come see me 1 hour a day. And my job is to get them to create, not just just consume. They're really good at reading other people's books. They can play other people's games, but I want them to be put in that incredibly frustrating, difficult, challenging place of making something not great, putting it out to other people, getting feedback, and then working to make it better.
Right. And the game design and the RPG design courses or classes that you run, are they the only classes that you run, or do you do other subjects as well?
With my 7th grade, all of them only do game design. With my 8th grade, so for UK, 7th grade is like 12 to 13.
Okay.
And then for my 8th grade, which is 13 to 14, I give them a list of things they can choose from. And so this year we're doing, my classes have chosen RPG design. We're also doing cosplay. We're also doing film, but I've taught everything from making crop circles, which was kind of interesting. There's a lot of math involved, a lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
and debate, just anything under the sun where, it's like basically there's a relatively small amount of knowledge that goes in, and the rest is all student output and problem solving and creative solutions.
It sounds like a very rewarding job for somebody who's seriously into it, which you are.
Oh, it is the best job in the world. It is the most fun that anyone could have. I mean, I work every day. Every day I'm struggling with challenges and problems, and that's what I love. Mm-hmm. If I just came in, with one thing and there was set answers for everything at the end and collect the papers and let's do that all over again. I've done that before, especially in the beginning when I was teaching history, but I do not know what's going to happen in any single class. In my classes, there's usually no right answer. It's what's your answer and how did you get there? And that, I think, is a lot more interesting. Cool.
So let's talk about you as a gamer. How long have you been a gamer then?
Oh, gosh, probably about 12, 13 years.
Okay. What kind of games do you prefer playing yourself? What's your sweet spot?
I love Uwe Rosenberg games.
Right.
He's probably my favorite designer. I love the Empire Builder series of train games.
Yeah.
Iron Dragon is just my jam. My favorite game from a design standpoint is Survive Escape from Atlantis.
Okay.
And one thing that was kind of fun with that, because, on Facebook, you get friend requests from people from, anybody related in gaming, because once you know a lot of people, then you just tend to show up. And Julian Cortland Smith, the game designer for Survive Escape from Atlantis, sent me a friend request. And I was like, oh, my God, I've made it.
Yep.
That's how I know I've made it in this world. When the designer of my favorite game sends me a friend request. Doesn't know me from Adam, I'm sure, but it was great.
Cool. Right. Okay, so let's go on to the topic of conversation.
Yes.
Which is a topic which has actually cropped up a number of times. So the UK Facebook group that I mentioned, the Board Game Trading and Chat UK Facebook group, over the last few years that I've been a member of that, it is a chat group, and a lot of the chat that takes place on there is not just about gaming. Sometimes it's about difficult situations that have occurred and people wanted to talk about it. And then as I was reading them, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I've had a few of those myself. And thankfully now, the gaming groups that I'm involved in don't have really any problem people. But a number of the gaming groups which I know people who are friends of mine, the ones that they're involved in, there are certainly problem people. And every time I just think, oh, God, I'm glad I wasn't there because I wouldn't be able to handle that situation. Yeah. And I'm one of the people who's supposed to help run groups. So I certainly need more tools in my arsenal. But it's clear from all of the responses that I've had, in the last 24 hours, and from the discussions I've seen over the years, that there is a problem with problem gamers, and it is more common than I would like to believe it is. So my first question to you is, do you have a possible explanation for why the gaming hobby seems to attract more people who are problem players?
Well, I mean, I guess if first we should be grateful for all the people who know they're problem players and don't even start gaming, I guess. We only have who we have at the table. I think when it comes to gaming, people have, every person has their own perspective, their own story, their own process, their own way of doing things. And when it comes to gaming, too, they have their own goals in terms of what they want to get out of it. And I think in a lot of ways, one of the things that's been really helpful for me in looking at gamers, understanding gamers, working with my students, because I teach gaming behaviors really, in addition, like very explicitly, whereas many people haven't necessarily had that. But I read the book Robbins' Laws of Good Game Mastering, and it talks about the different types of RPG players. You've got the butt kicker who just wants to go in there and just smash things. You've got the role player who just loves the acting component, and I think that was really helpful in terms of looking at all the different reasons why people go to the table. And I think where problems start is, one, there's just a misunderstood conception that everyone is there for the same reason and has the same ultimate goal as people. Now, it should be just to play the game, but everyone has their own perspective and their own desires for what happens at the table. And one thing I think that, going back to RPGs, that's helpful is, in a lot of RPG sessions, you have these sort of like zero sessions where you're not just doing character creation, but you're kind of setting the ground rules for how we're going to play, when it comes to like the social contract that everybody has. And in gaming, especially like if you go to a con where you could be playing with anybody, or even in your gaming group, if you've been playing for a while and these sorts of behaviors, kind of start and then keep going, it's kind of hard to figure out how you're going to pull that back, In one of my gaming groups, there was discussions about how can we find a night where this person can't come, as opposed to speaking to that person directly, which is, of course, like on paper, the obvious choice, but it's hard to do.
It is. So the first situation that I wanted to run past you is a friend of mine, James Cheevers. He basically posted on this Facebook group that I mentioned about a week ago. He said that he's been running a group since 2006. So he's been going 12 years. He had no issues whatsoever until he joined Meetup. I don't know if you have Meetup over in America.
We do.
But it's
we
right,
do.
Okay. And he said a small number of players joined that ended up being problem players, and they took residence. And he says that these players, to be blunt, changed the whole dynamic of the group. And what's happened is there are now a lot of people at the club who just actively avoid gaming with them. Some people will even arrive at the club early, set up a game in advance, which is obviously, it suits them, but it's excluding anybody else from joining in. There are other people who deliberately refuse to say what game they're going to join in on until these problem players have found a game, and then they go and choose something else. And I think James also said to me that a number of people have actually stopped coming to the club because of this. So it's clearly having an impact on the club.
Oh, absolutely.
And how do you start dealing with anything like this?
Yeah, that's really tough. That's, I think, a pretty universal problem.
Yeah.
Certainly when I go to meetups, and you don't know who you're going to play with. There was one guy that I played with one of the very last ones I went to. We were playing Terraforming Mars, and he would get up, wander away from the table when it wasn't his turn. And then when it was his turn, he would like sit back down and like rediscover the board.
Yes.
And there's
What's
that whole...
happened?
Yeah. We've all been there, and it's really, really frustrating because, you're like, dude, you're slowing everything down and you're not playing well. And it's really, really frustrating. And it's one of those things where I even said to him, I said, do you mind staying, at the table for when we're playing so that you don't have to relearn the game when you're playing? He's like, well, I just can't sit for that long. I have to get up and move. You know, and he's an adult and he can make those decisions for himself. All the rest of us are sitting there, and in the end of the day, it's a relatively minor inconvenience. Ultimately, we're still playing the game. He comes back, does his turn. And it slows things down, but so we can deal with it. But will I probably do everything I can to avoid playing games with him in the future? Yeah, because it's frustrating because I tried to communicate to him like a very specific thing I wanted him to do or that we wanted him to do in order to make the game flow better. But in the end, what he needed, outweighed that.
Right.
And, it's one of those things where the hardest thing to do is to talk to other adults about things like this, because people don't like conflict. They don't want to feel like they're, parenting somebody else. People who don't want to talk to other people probably don't like quarterbacking in co-op games. And that's what this can feel like, But the thing that's so tough is I think it's one of those things where, when you have those moments, rather than singling out individual people, is there a way that you can kind of address everyone and just say, we've been playing together, things have been going for a while, there have been a few concerns that have been raised, and, we need to address them. And for the happiness and the well-being of our gaming group, we need to set some ground rules. And if you find you can't accept these ground rules, then we welcome you to discover other groups in the area.
Right.
You know, and
which is a polite way of saying, you know, get lost kind of thing. I mean, James hasn't covered any specific examples, obviously, like you have, and we've got some more specific examples later on. It was more, you know, I've heard from a lot of people that I know and say, oh, there was this person at the club last night and they were drinking too much and they weren't paying attention, or they were doing this or they were doing that. And I said, has anybody spoken to them?
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head by saying, you know, I don't like conflict. I avoid conflicts wherever I can. That's not just a trait that's unique to me. That's a trait that seems to be common to most of the human race. We don't like it. We don't like having to speak to somebody, you know, about something that's negative.
Right.
And my only suggestion to James was, you need to speak to whoever's running the club, because it's their responsibility in a way.
Right.
So whoever's running the club,
right,
is their responsibility.
And it sucks, because for the person who's running the club, they're doing a good thing. They're taking their time and energy to set up this regular gaming group, you know, and it's in some ways like, it's like, haven't I done enough? You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing all this work to set all this up, and you're coming in and, you know, you're kind of ruining it, you know, or you're making me have to you're making me feel uncomfortable about dealing with a situation that I don't feel like I should have to deal with, because I've already done all this work. Yes, I was a meetup organizer for many years. So I absolutely understand where this is coming from. But I think it's one of those things where, you know, we're adults, and I was playing for a while, fairly regularly at this guy's house, and you know, and I want to make sure it's very clear, I can be an absolute problem gamer. If I don't like a game, you will know. Like, I will take my turns. I mean, I am 43 years old. I've had 43 years of being absolutely a ridiculous, obnoxious ass, and I've had to, I mean, really learn hard how to overcome some of that, because I have to, because of my job, because of just, I want to have friends, I want to be a good gamer. But I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, I mean, huge pain in the ass. So, you know, I've had to become really, really cognizant of my behaviors in order to, you know, be a good gamer myself. So there's nothing I'm saying here that's from like, oh, those people over there. No. But
I think, I mean, you know, the first thing to go back to James is, somebody's going to have to speak to them.
Yeah.
And if they don't, I think I think this has been going on for quite a while, and I think it's already damaged. I mean, there are some people at the club who don't go to the club anymore.
Right.
There are other people who are, you know, setting up games in advance. Well, they're going to stop coming to the club eventually. They'll just say, well, why do we bother going to the club?
Right. And honestly, some of those people can be part of the problem too, honestly, because... Right. You know, because, and I get it, you know, I totally get it, where you just want to go, you want to play your game, and you want to play with games with people you know you can get along with. I get it. But also, with those people also not taking any share of the responsibility collectively to deal with problem people, it disproportionately puts it on other people.
Right.
And again, you don't necessarily want to... It's funny, because games are all about conflict and making your best choices.
Yeah.
With the options on the table
within the game.
Like, the meta game of gaming itself is so much more difficult in a lot of ways than the games presented.
Yeah. Well, this is like me. I don't play conflict heavy games, but when I put my worker on that spot and collect the 3 wood that you needed. Oh wow, that's the most evil move I could ever make. You know, that's
and because that's one of the comments that came up, like people who absolutely lose it when someone takes their spot. And the thing is, you know, so in my gaming club, we have some very specific rules in terms of how to play, and they're not hard, you know. And if you're interested in them, go to KathleenMercury.com and look up Running a Game Club. Okay. My game club rules. Well, and just going back to my earlier story that I lost my train of, I got an email from one of the guys in my group that said, hey, listen, when you don't like a game, it's very clear, and it makes it not fun to play with you. because I complain about, and plus too, being a game designer, like I'm kind of like, why'd they do that? And people don't necessarily want that. They don't want to look behind the curtain. They just want to enjoy the show for what it is, And so it's like, and it was a helpful moment for me, honestly. Like I didn't take it badly because I thought, you know what, he took the time to tell this to me, it was through email. So it kind of spared him, like both of us, like the awkwardness of face to face. He had time to put his thoughts down together. Once I kind of got over my little bit of, once I thought about it, I was like, that's fair. I mean, it's totally fair. It's his perspective. I can learn something from it. If I choose not to, then I probably will, annoy other people. So what are you going to do? But you just have to go with it. So
somebody's going to have to speak to them, however that's done. And the situation you described when you talked to that person about terraforming Mars, was that your club?
That's the local St. Louis meetup.
So were you responsible for doing the organization of that?
No, I used to be, but I stepped down for being an organizer.
But you still stepped in and said something to that person in order to try and help this. See, most people wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and because that's what I do on a daily basis. You know what I mean? I teach young, pre-teenagers who are, every single day is different in terms of them trying to figure out who they are. And I have to be very specific with them as they're learning so that they see where boundaries are because they're constantly pushing them and testing them. So I'm very comfortable with kids saying that. With adults, I really think about how I'm going to say this so it comes across as like, hey, fellow human, not, hey, I'm your mom, hey, I'm your teacher. But so it's something that I do. But on the other hand, the alternative is silence is consent. And if you don't say anything, you're letting it happen. And if you're unhappy, you have a right to say what you want to say. You can't guarantee that they're going to be, that they're going to agree and they're going to love what you're saying. And that's okay. But the thing is what you have to gain should be better than what you're currently losing. And expecting things to change without doing anything, I mean, there's like, people make jokes like, it's like the definition of, like whatever, insanity or whatever. But I disagree with that, obviously. But but the idea is you can't expect things to stay the same, to do nothing, but expect a change to happen. It doesn't like magically appear. So the rules I have for my game club, play nice, win nice, lose nice. We talk about everybody wants to win, not going to happen, all that. Everyone cleans up, check the floor. No quitting unless all players want to quit. So if you're in a game and you're losing, then, suck it up, buttercup, and you have to see it to the end, learn from that, No food and drinks far away from board games, clean hands, bad components, put away games as you found them, stack them horizontally, no boxes on the floor, quietish voices, which for my students is the hardest part because, they scream. But one of the most important ones, I think, is no talking to the person whose turn it is because that allows the player to make their own decisions without influence from the general populace, so that otherwise every turn becomes a negotiation. Don't do that. I need that. Why don't you go there instead? And by respecting the fact that we are all trying to win, we all want to get the most points or build the most temples or whatever it is. Too bad, so sad. Other people are going to get in your way. And your job as a gamer is not to take their choices away, but for you to optimize what you have left on the table. It's sloppy gaming to try to win by losing your head over what plan somebody is getting in the way of. I'm sorry, but it is. You have to figure out something else. Too bad, so sad.
Well, I'll definitely put a link to those rules, certainly in the show notes, because a lot of the situations that people have come up with are definitely covered by that. So let's just go into a few more of them.
Okay.
And this is one you haven't mentioned, and this is about phone use.
Oh, yeah.
Is that in your rules?
No, because I can tell my kids if, at the very beginning when they come, if you need to, text, call your mom, let her know you're here, fine. But otherwise, I can say no phones. And because in a school, kids are used to not being able to have their phones in class, it's really, really easily. But I think this is probably for adults one of the biggest sources of contention because I'm guilty of this too. And there's something that said like people check their phones like 100 to 200 times a day. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awful. And then I thought about it. I'm probably well in there, if not exceeding that. You know what I mean? Because it only takes a second. Like, oh, what's going on? Oh, look, somebody messaged me. Cool.
Bing,
like, happy
just got a
day.
message. Yep.
And that's the thing is, like, it's tough after you get into that nasty little habit, that device can really start to control you, and it's hard to let it go.
It's hard to avoid it, and it really frustrates me, and it frustrates a lot of other people who've mentioned it. And it depends what they're doing. You know, I will be on my phone in the middle of the game because I'm taking a photo of it and I'm putting it out on Twitter, and that's important for me and my social media presence.
Sure.
And so it feels wrong of me to say, right, everybody put the phones away, when then I'm doing it myself. But, you know, I'm not responding to other comments or anything like that. But sometimes, I mean, people have sort of said, oh yeah, the people are on the phone while you're reading the rules to them, and they're not listening, or they're on the phone when it's not their turn and things like that.
Right.
And more people now are using their phones, as you say, they're checking them all the time.
Right.
And I think just somebody needs to say something about it. If it's frustrating for you and or anybody else at the table, then somebody just needs to say something. Right.
And I think this is, again, going back to that idea of like a zero session, where when it comes to what are the expectations here that we want everyone to follow. And if this isn't right for you, then you can find a different group.
Find a different group.
You know, that's just, you know, like, so I've started gaming on some days during the week at with Jamie Stegmeyer. Yeah, with Stonemaier Games. They're here in town, and very clearly on the board is written, no phones during game nights, you know? And it's one of those things where, like, a quick little snap of a photo, if you know, like, after a couple hours, we're adults, there's stuff going on, you know? You want to make sure nobody's in the hospital. Like, I get it, you know? Like, between a game, if you want to peek real quick, but it's something that is explicitly stated, you know, to be off your phones. And I know I've done it, you know? I know I've done it, like, in role-playing games where, like, if I'm not in a scene or, like, I'm just not feeling it that night, you know what I mean? Like, I've totally done this. And the thing is, there's that voice inside me that says, you're being a jerk. You're being a jerk. You're not in the moment. You're not paying attention. Like, you're being rude to all the people, but, like, you still do it sometimes, you know? And I think it's one of those things, self-awareness is a wonderful thing, and it's something we're all working on, you know? But just, like, why am I doing this? Why am I picking up my phone? What is keeping me from being focused on the moment here? And it's like, baby, you can be patient. You can wait your turn. You don't need a toy to distract you when it's not your turn. Like, this is my internal monologue. I'm not yelling at anybody else, you know?
I mean, 10 years ago, we didn't have these devices, and we coped perfectly fine.
Right. And in some ways,
now we have this constant need. I mean, I do the same, you know, I'm constantly on it. I'm constantly checking it. And anytime there's any kind of notification, I feel I have to check it. I don't. It's a problem, and it's become more of a problem as time's gone on. Right. And I can't seem to break out of it. But I try to at game night, because I know it frustrates me. So the phone question came in from Stephen Robertson, but you know, a number of other people have mentioned it as well. And Mark replied and said he actually goes to the same club, and he said, "Are you here to play the game or play on your phone?" So Mark actually stepped up and said something about it, and I think it brings me back to the first thing I said: is somebody has to.
I think that's a great response, and I think if you set the expectations up front, people can't be mad. But if you don't, and then things like, wait a minute, we need to change this because you're annoying me, then it becomes personal, then it gets icky. But if it just becomes, this is what we do, our culture, you know, whatever, then if you set that expectation in advance, people know, and then they can respond from there. But, you know, because... But yeah, when you're playing a game, you look over and someone is not only playing the game on the table, but playing a different game on their phone. Like, yeah, great for you. You're super smart. Look at you playing 2 games at once. But the rest of it, you're having a great time, but you're negatively impacting others' experience.
As you say, when it gets to their turn, they have to then reevaluate the situation because they've lost track of what's going on. So anyway, going on to something else that Mark mentioned, because Mark's actually been to my house once, and he said that when he was here, one of the other people who he was playing a game with was basically trying to take everybody's go for them. Now, this is not in a cooperative game. This is a normal, you know, competitive style game, but this one player, and I think I know who he was talking about, and it isn't from any malice whatsoever. It's just somebody who likes to talk, somebody who likes to help people out, somebody who likes to teach people rules or help people with rules, but there is a line. There is a line over where you end up just telling them what to do and taking your turn for them. And just coming back to one of the things that you have in your rules of when it's somebody's turn, nobody's allowed to talk to them. I personally would not be able to stick to that because I have my teacher head on at all times. And I am always trying to help people learn games. And if I spot an amazing move for them, I want to help them. And I will point out, if I'll say, look, I've got no troops on my left side and you get +3 for attacking me on my left side. I'm really vulnerable to you at the moment. You know, if you wanted to attack me, now would be a good time to do it. Or don't forget, you've got 4 of those blue things, and if you trade them in at this planet here, you'll get a bazillion points. I cannot stop myself doing that because I am almost always in teacher mode.
Well, as a teacher, I get that. And this is what I would say in response. 1, you have prevented them from making that discovery on their own. Whether it's too late for them to really utilize that, for them to learn from that experience. And it creates sort of a dependency from other players learning the game where they feel like they're not good at the game and somebody else is having to tell them. It might make them not want to play the game again or only follow the strategies that you showed them, that you taught them. So, there's that kind of thing. And the other thing, too, is if anything else, rather than saying, do this, what I do is say, because I'll say, do you want me to give you a hint? I know you're learning the game.
Right.
And then if you ask, and people can say yes, people can say no. But if you jump in and tell them, you have taken that choice away from them. And I'll play games with a lot of luck sometimes, but I want to choose playing a game with a lot of luck. Likewise, if people are playing a game with choices, I'd rather somebody let me make bad choices. This happened a couple weekends ago. I had a bunch of gamers down at my lake house. We're playing games all weekend. It was great. And one guy kept telling me what to do on my turns. And I did something. He's like, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. I said, I would much rather make my bad decision than play your good one.
Right.
If this is the hill I die on, cool. But this is my decision. I don't want to play yours. And I was getting really annoyed with that. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you would, if you'd have said it a couple of times, he would have learned. But, some of us don't. So what I've got from you is that I should be, and I do this. I say, look, I've spotted quite a cool move. If you wanted a hint of what it might be, or I'll let you do your thing, but give people the option of doing that.
And you should really only offer that during the first half of the game. After that, people, if you've done a good job of teaching the game, if they've done a good job of learning the game, or
depending on the game, yes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a learning game, and you're going to just muck around till the end, and then you're like, oh, okay, I totally get it now. That's fine. But the thing is it's really hard, but you got to sit on your hands. There are times when you're like inside, you're screaming, I want to help you. I want to help you. Yeah. And you're not helping them. You're helping yourself feel better. You're getting it out, but you're taking something away from them and their experience. And you have to remember that part.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that Mark mentioned is on the other thing that you mentioned in your rules is that somebody wins and somebody loses, or what was it?
Play nice, win nice, lose nice.
Lose nice. So yeah, the sore loser. And Mark's mentioned an extended family member, but I've seen this before as well. Even accusing other players of setting other people up so that they don't win.
Yeah, my response to that would be I absolutely was trying to do everything possible to set you up not to win, because I was trying to win. What's the problem?
Yeah. Chewy's mentioned the attitude where somebody seems to behave as if they are the best players of the game and remind everyone constantly. And then if they lose, they declare it's because of such and such a thing. Oh, well, I would have won, but you rolled 5 6s on the trot, and that the chance of that happening is whatever to 1, and I would have won otherwise.
Yeah, but you didn't. It sucks, doesn't
something like that. And it's like, I've gamed with somebody who was like that, who was genuinely good at games, but there's no point in going out of your way to say. I don't know whether it was something to do with the fact that they were annoyed by themselves if they didn't win, and was therefore looking for justification.
Right.
Oh, I didn't win because of a rule that you forgot to tell me, or something like that, rather than just accepting it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're playing the game, not playing other people. I mean, you can certainly try to use knowledge of other players and certain strategies they like to do. Like if I play Or at Labora with my friend Willie, I have to shut down the Magic Pop-Tart route, because otherwise he will just ride that straight to victory. And it's super annoying because the Magic Pop-Tart route is not interesting to me at all, but I have to do it. Or I just say, Willie's going to win, but let's see what else I can do. That's cool. Willie's a great gamer. But the one thing I say a lot to my students is, especially if I see a kid starting to get kind of intense, starting to get upset, I say, look, we don't get upset over wood, paper, cardboard, and plastic. At the end of the day, this is just a game. It's not worth, damaging your friendships with other people or losing out on friendships with other people at the table. It's not, it's wood, paper, cardboard, and plastic. It's not personal. Okay. It's a game. If you're taking it personally, you need to maybe think about why you're doing that, why it's so important to you, but everybody here deserves the same chance to win. If everybody doesn't have the same chance to win, or you think other people shouldn't have the same chance to win as you, then you need to find better gamers who provide you with more of a challenge. Right.
Okay. Now, moving on to cheating, and we've got 3 different classifications of it. We have the sort of cheating not really in the spirit of the game, where somebody was playing Descent, for example, and then before rolling the dice, turning the dice in a certain direction in their hand, so that when they rolled them, they had more chance of landing on the sides that they wanted.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Dice Tower.
Well, yeah, it's not in the spirit of the game.
Absolutely not.
Then there is actual cheating. Where somebody will deliberately go out of their way to cheat, and you have to watch them like a hawk. When you catch them out, how do you deal with that?
When it comes to the cheating aspect, there was, I forget what game it was, but in the rules it said, what if people cheat? And the response, and like this was in the FAQ in the back of the rule book, it said, then don't play with that person anymore. And I think like fundamentally, we're all approaching a game where there are a set of rules, we're abiding by those rules in order to do the best we can and hopefully win the game. And if people can't accept that sort of like fundamental proposition, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean it like that, but it's just like, it's because it's a lot of the same things that we keep kind of saying over and over again. Yeah. Is at the end of the day, the goal is to win correctly. It's not to win by, doing something that you're not supposed to do. That you can't do. Or, if anything, only play cheating moth with them until they promise that they're going to not cheat anymore. So, yeah, I'll play with you, but we'll play cheating moth because it's a game where cheating is directly built into the rules, Right. But, I mean, the thing is like, at the end of the day, that's, to me, I think that's probably out of all the behaviors. Like, you can deal with phones, you can deal with people getting up and walking away, but the cheating aspect, to me, is probably the most egregious because it goes so fundamentally against 100% what we're trying to do. And quite honestly, if there was somebody that was like that, I would say, look, you're a good person. I think, perhaps we can be friends, but I'm not playing games with you anymore because you're making this not fun for me. You're taking the gaming experience away from what it's supposed to be. And I don't care if you win or not. This is not fun. I don't want to play. I would just say I don't want to play with you anymore.
So you would say something, which brings us back to the same thing. Somebody's got to say something. Yeah. And Ian Hayward, friend of mine, he said that he had a chap at the Chippenham Club, cheated all the time. And people let it go because his terminally ill dad was also playing. But they lost people at the club because of it. Right. And eventually, I mean, he doesn't say eventually, but the fact that he says they lost people at the club because of it leads me to think that this was going on a while and people were fed up that it was going on and didn't come anymore. And eventually they asked him to leave. He was spoken to several times and it still came as a shock to him. Yeah. And so it's like, well, did he know he was cheating? Well, maybe he did, and maybe he thought he could get away with it. And I've known people who deliberately cheat before, and I don't ever want to play with them. And the problem is, I take it for granted. I mean, I played Magic the Gathering at a competitive level, UK nationals and things like that, and I was enjoying it and everything else. And then I became aware of a level of cheating going on at quite a high level, and it really upset me. I mean, I've played games against these people in the UK nationals, and suddenly find that, and because I'm so naive, and I think everybody's good and nobody will do anything bad, I just assumed that nobody would do that. And it turns out that they were doing it, and then I was the one that was cheated. I was cheated out of a potential win by somebody who was drawing extra cards because I wasn't looking properly. I mean, I've got this thing that everything always has to be right and everything has to be done correctly. So, of course, in my world, everybody does things by the book. Right. And nobody steps outside of that. But in a gaming group, I'm thankful that I don't have that at the moment, but I'm aware that other people have. And again, you need to watch them like a hawk, because you can't accuse them of cheating without them doing it. And then only you will know, maybe speaking to other people in your club, as to whether they are doing it deliberately. And when it turns out that they are doing it deliberately and, you've pointed it out, then somebody needs to speak to them.
Right. And and that's the thing, because just remember, silence is consent. If you're letting this happen, you are telling them that this is okay.
Yeah, yeah. So going on to accidental cheating, which is what I call it, but a friend of mine, Chris, doesn't like the term accidental cheating. So we're going to call it shenanigans instead. And this is where, and I've got 2 friends of mine who do this all the time, right? And I have other friends of mine that have spoken to me about them and said that they are deliberately cheating. And they're not. I will put my heart on the line and say that they are not deliberately cheating.
Right.
I know these people as people, and they're not deliberately cheating. One of them is just never with it. And he doesn't know what's going on half the time. And unless you watch him like a hawk, you'll get to the end of the game and you'll find that he's been playing a completely different game. Right? It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine just has difficulty in doing that. Oh, don't forget, you've got to pay 12 for that. Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Yeah.
He's not deliberately cheating. He just forgets these things now and again. But I've had people come to me and say, just to let you know, I don't want to play games with him again because he's always cheating. And I'm like, wow, is he? Because I've played games with this person a lot, and I would have never said they've cheated. But then when they explained the kind of things that they were doing, I was like, oh yeah, he does that all the time. It's not a deliberate attempt to cheat. It's just forgetting certain things at certain times.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to be careful.
I wasn't laughing at the person. I was laughing because I recognized something in what you said about myself. I mean, the worst way for me to learn anything is auditorially. If somebody just talks through the rules without actually showing things moving around on the board as examples, it's really, really hard for me to learn how all these pieces fit together, how I'm going to do it. You know, when somebody can teach a game really well, to me, that's just like one of the best things ever. And so I will make a lot of mistakes. I will forget things myself just because it's hard for me to take all that in at the beginning, especially if it's a complex game with a lot of different moving pieces going on. So if it's making mistakes, you know, making mistakes and cheating are not the same things. Cheating is doing something with an intent.
Deliberately.
Yeah, deliberately to try to game the system or to take an advantage that isn't there, you know. I mean, but one thing that I'm super guilty of is, well, I like to play fast. You know, even if there's a turn where I really need to make take my time doing it. I remember I was playing Feast for Odin a few weeks back, and I had the worst AP in that game that I've ever had, and I don't even know how long. And it's like, look, it's just going to take a minute. You know, like I need to really think all this out. But generally speaking, I try to play fast, and sometimes when I try to play fast, I miss things or realize something. And it's one of those things where, you know, when it comes to mulligans, you know, is that what you call it over there? Yep. So when it comes to like wanting
takes his backsies or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because like in one of our gaming groups, they had such a big problem with people wanting takebacks, like going throughout the game, that they had to say something as a club, like, as a club, we do not do takebacks. You know, they had to be, and they said something as opposed to letting this problem continue. But the thing is usually like in a game where, let's say it's after like your turn's over, if you realize something really quickly, and I say, listen, I just realized I want to do this. It won't affect the game. Can I just, you know, swap this or that? But I ask. I don't just do it. Yeah. And the thing is it has to happen early in the game, and you only get one. You know, there are times where it's like, oh man, I shouldn't have done it, and people will say like, oh, do you want to take it back? Like, nope, it's what I did. I got to play it as it lays. This is what happens, and you have to accept the fact that you will make mistakes, and there are things you're going to want to do over. And even if the game is going on the table, you just shouldn't do it. Right.
Now, I'm just looking at the list of questions we've had in and what time it is. We're not going to get through all of these questions today. So for everybody who has asked a question, I'm going to ask Kathleen to go through this list and puts together some kind of written response to them at some point whenever you get a chance. Sure. But there is one thing that I did want to just touch on, and this is from Tony Boydell, who posted something this morning. And this, it was also posted by a couple of other people as well. It's the other aspect of this. It's the person who is the problem gamer. The person who's being difficult or who's being the problem gamer, there might be something going on with them. And what we've talked about at the moment is the problem gamer, somebody needs to go and speak to them. And we've covered cheating and things like that, which is a different thing entirely. But what happens if somebody is just being aggressive, or they're being hostile, or they're doing all of this, or they're looking at their phone every 5 minutes, and then it turns out they've got a family member critically ill in hospital, for example, right? And they didn't feel comfortable in sharing that information with other people. Or that person's currently suffering from stress, is signed off work ill due to stress-related illness that you don't know about because they're just a member of the club, but gaming is their only way that they can socially interact with people that they enjoy. So they still want to come to the club, but clearly in their headspace, they're not in a good place at the moment.
Right.
So it's, how do we know when somebody is a problem gamer as to whether it is just them being a dick and it needs to be sorted out, or actually we need to show them a bit of leniency and actually speak to the people who are criticising them to say, look, you know, go easy on him at the moment because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and thank you for saying Zed. I just love that so much. So there's a famous children's show here called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he's the nicest, sweetest man in the history of television. You know, changes his sweaters and does all these things, and he is just the absolute voice of like calm, loving, you know, sort of childhood for so many people.
Right.
And one of the famous quotes was, "There isn't," and I'm not getting it right. I'll look it up, but it's basically, "There isn't a person that you couldn't love if you knew their story." And I think that's one thing is like, we are all messy, fractured humans, and we're all trying to do the best we can. And some days our best is not the ultimate best that we would want for ourselves. I say this teaching the kids that I teach. And I think at the end of the day, you know, having some like, you know, recognizing that it's amazing to me, the amount of baggage some of these kids have that I have had nowhere close to experiencing. And these are kids, and they come in and they're expected to learn math and to read and all that. And so I think there has to be that component where you're not just seeing the people at the table with you as, you know, turn takers, resource stealers, you know, but to see them as people who might have other things going on. And whenever you assume that people are like you and that they have the same perspective, you know, the things I've been saying, whenever you assume that, you know, you're missing out on something. I think if people don't tell you, you know, what's going on, then you can't possibly know, and you can't be held responsible if they're super stressed out, if they're not in a good place, and you do something that's normal and it sets them off or it makes it really hard and uncomfortable. If you didn't know, you can't, you know, like, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. But one thing is, I was on the podcast Great Way Games, and one of the things they do at the start of every episode is they say, "How's everybody doing?" Like on a scale of 1 to 10, and people would give a number, and you don't have to say why you're giving yourself a 4 or why you're giving yourself a 9 or a 10, but everybody just kind of gave a number. And when I did one episode, one of the women said she was kind of at a 4, didn't really want to talk about it, and so in that episode, she wasn't as vocal as the others. I mean, she certainly was, you know, contributing and participating, but I think it's something where if you're not comfortable, if you're playing with total strangers, you don't necessarily want to get in their business.
No.
But I think if you're going to a gaming event and you've got a lot of stuff going on, even to say, "Hey, listen, guys, I have a lot of stuff going on. I really want to play today, but if I seem a little distracted, that might be why," and just leave it at that. I mean, at least people know.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's for the people who are aware of it.
Yeah.
What about the people who are part of your local gaming group or go to your local gaming club who have mental health difficulties or difficulties in interacting, you know, social anxiety and things like that, who are only go to the gaming club, who are not friends with anybody else there. You only see them at game club, but they've clearly got issues. And unfortunately, those issues manifest themselves in the games by them having to walk away from the table every 5 minutes, having to be on their phone, being distracted, whatever. But they have their own reasons why.
Right.
And it's obviously needed for them, but it's affecting everybody else.
Well, and the thing too is I have kids, like I said, with all kinds of problems. And at the end of the day, we all still have responsibility over our behavior. And even though things make sense for you and are right for you, if it's doing something that's negatively impacting the collective experience, this may not be the right time. You may want a game more than anything right now, but if you're not really capable of handling the social environment, you know, you either need to find people who are really understanding and patient. And if that doesn't happen, you know, I don't ever want to push people. I mean, I really don't want to push people out. Like, I try to work with kids as much as possible, you know, as far as that goes. But at the end of the day, you know, like, it just depends on what it is. But, there's apps that you can game. If you really want to play games tonight, there's all kinds of ways you can do it that doesn't necessarily mean you negatively impact other people. Because even with as much going on, you're still entering a social environment where there are rules and expectations. And that's so hard, especially if people are like autism spectrum, which gaming certainly has a large population. I work with a large population of kids who are on the spectrum when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, in order to be a functional member of society, this is something that you have to learn. And that's why I'm happy to teach them this in my club, to develop those sorts of behaviors, to be good gamers, to not scream every time you do something great, because there's all these other tables that are negatively impacted, But it's one.
I mean, a number of the examples that we've been given here, Louis says his biggest bugbear in the game is not during the game, but afterwards, when one player just doesn't get involved. He doesn't even say thanks or anything. He just gets up, leaves the table and goes and finds something else and makes them pack away on their own. That person just needs speaking to. So many of the examples I'm looking at in this Google Doc that I threw together here, so many of these examples, I think you just need to speak to them. The guy who's constantly reading, the BBC website on his phone during the rules explanation because he doesn't need to listen, and then constantly asking questions during the game and getting all the rules wrong. It's impacting the enjoyment of the other people who are in that game. So those people, I know I'm going off here for mental health issues, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to divide things into groups. So those people, the getting up from walking away from the table and not helping pack it up, and those kind of people, that's not a mental health issue, I'm assuming, right? That is just somebody at some point needs to speak to them. It's selfish, but you need to speak to them. And whether they know they're doing it or not, the point is, certainly in the clubs that I've run, is my responsibility is to the club as a whole. And whilst I'd love every single member of the club to be happy and enjoying themselves, if one person's actions are actually impacting the enjoyment of everybody else who plays with them, then that's a situation that needs to be dealt with. And I have in the past had to take that person aside. I know you mentioned earlier on saying things to everybody at once, but I have found that taking individuals off to one side and say, look, I need to speak to you about something. A number of people at the club and me feel that, X, Y, Z, and it's not fair on the rest of the people. So,
Well, and the thing, too, is a lot of times when it comes to people who are on the spectrum, gaming is so good for them because it's a way to interact socially with other people in a very structured way where there's rules. And they're not expected to do social sort of chit-chat. So for a lot of people, gaming is, and I'm honestly, like, my boyfriend is not I think if he like nowadays would probably be diagnosed on the spectrum. We've talked about this. This will not be a surprise if he listens to this, But that's the thing. It's like he won't give you eye contact. He won't engage in chit chat with you. But when it comes to games and gaming, he does it. He has very specific rules. He will not eat when he plays a game. Will not. End of story. There's just different things about him. And gaming is something that allowed him to be social, to meet other people, and to be badgered by people like me with questions until finally he agreed to go out with me, and so that's cool. But so for people especially who have autism spectrum disorders or similar, social anxiety, whatever, games can be a really good form of social recreation, interaction, intellectual challenge. It can play to all of their strengths. And that's a really, really good thing. And that's a really important thing. It's one of the reasons why I believe so strongly in it for my kids, because kids who are on the spectrum can learn a lot of important social behaviors, but kids who aren't on the spectrum can still learn a lot of really important behaviors. Learning how to be patient, learning how to take turns. It's just not things for, 4-year-olds. I mean, these are things for all of us sometimes need better instruction on that. But the thing is having written rules for a lot of people who are spectrum, rules are incredibly important. And when those rules are posted, when those rules are, explicitly stated, when those rules are enforced, you might get some, rebuff or whatever. But the thing is this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. You can't have it both ways where you want everybody to do it exactly as you want them to do something without telling them. My students don't know how to meet my expectations unless I tell them what those expectations are.
Okay, so go to your website. I'll put a link in the show notes. Get these rules, and if you are a member of a games club, then try to encourage the people who run that club to set club rules, which is after a game, all players should help pack it away. And if somebody can't because they're running late and they've got to go and pick the daughter up, fine.
Right.
They say, look, I'm going to have to run, off I go. But just getting, things like that. Phones at the table, drinks on the table, whatever your club rules are, and whatever you feel, whatever people are complaining to you about as gamers, about other people, then make them club rules. But as you say, you can't keep everybody happy.
Right.
All of the time.
Right, right. So. and it might be that it's a real bummer, like that this isn't right for you. Or maybe why don't you take some time and try again or whatever it is. Or just say, you know what, you're not welcome here. Let's you and I meet up in a month or so if you want to, and we can talk about things. We can play together. It's just the two of us and talk this out. But right now this is not working. And I'm, you're fired, that's so hard to do when it's a voluntary activity that people can do. But on the other hand, we don't just have a responsibility to ourselves. We have a responsibility to other people. We have a responsibility to the community. And you have to accept those things whenever you're wanting to engage and interact with other people that aren't yourself. And it's a bummer when when it's not the world you want, but you have to deal with the world we have, and you have to adjust, as difficult as that might be. And it's funny, I was at Starbucks this morning because we got up super early and I was going to need it. So Starbucks now posted rules for their space. We strive to create a culture of warmth and belonging, and respectfully request that everyone use spaces as intended. And there's some descriptions like you're not supposed to use drugs at Starbucks, other than caffeine, I guess. Be considerate of others, communicate with respect, and act responsibly. And it's the same thing for Starbucks,
right?
Can carry over into gaming. We just have certain responsibilities that when we're in public spaces dealing with other people, that we have to treat people respectfully. We have to respect the game. We have to respect the space. And sometimes that means that I can't tell people what to do during their turns. And sometimes that means that if I don't like a game, I can't sit there and whine loudly about it because I'm negatively impacting other people's experience. And that's not okay when it's really my issue. It's not one that's shared by other people.
Well, let's wrap things up. We've been chatting for a while. Thank you very much for giving up your time, and thank you in advance for the extra time that you're going to give up with going through the rest of these comments.
Yeah, but, I'm happy to.
I think a lot of them are people just, as you say, frustrated about various things that annoy them. But reading through all of these, I think half of them are just down to, look, somebody's going to have to speak to that individual and say, look, I'm really sorry to say this, but your actions are affecting other people at the club, etc., etc.
Right, and we might spend 2 weeks thinking about a 2-minute conversation in advance.
Oh, and longer, and the rest. Yeah.
But it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Once you do it, chances are it's going to be better. And most of the time, you're like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah. So sometimes the last time I had to do it was probably about a year ago. And I put it off for 6 weeks because I didn't want to do it.
Right.
It made me uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, I really need to do something. Oh, no, that'll be too difficult. I won't do it. And then the problem happened again and other people got annoyed. And I was like, oh, I really must say something. And then eventually, after about 2 months, I did. And it felt so much better for doing it. Now, the thing is, then the person who I'd spoken to had to then be monitored. I was like, well, are they going to listen? Are they going to improve? Are they going to be any different? So there were still things that needed to be done afterwards. And I'm happy to say that the situation did get a little bit better. And then the person left because they got a job in another part of the country and moved away. So that problem sorted itself out eventually.
Yeah.
But the fact is, what I'm saying is I spent 2 months of that going around and round and round in my head and losing sleep over it and how am I going to say it? And then when I did it, I felt so much better. And the reason I felt so much better is not because I'd done something for me, but because I'd fulfilled my responsibility to the other members of the club. And that is where my responsibility, that is who I was concerned about, because it wasn't annoying me as much as it was annoying other people.
Yeah.
But it was making them unhappy, and I did what I did in order to try and make the situation better for everybody else, and that is what made me feel better in the end. But again, it was having to speak to somebody. It was a difficult conversation,
Right.
and it was conflict.
Right.
And we try and avoid that whenever we can. Unless, of course, I need that 3 wood, and then you're not getting that space. I'm having it.
Right.
It's mine.
Yeah, that's a real bummer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no,
Right.
I think that's it. You know, I think it just comes down to that you just have to talk to people, and as uncomfortable as it might make you, the payoff is worth it.
Even if that person then says, well, screw you, walks out and leaves the club.
Okay, that's a
Result.
You absolutely can do that.
Yeah, yeah. Right, on that note, let's wrap things up. So just a quick note where people can find you. Not your actual physical address, just, the virtual ones.
I'm a block east of the Botanical Garden in St. Louis. You're welcome anytime.
Okay, cool. I'll be right round.
We have we've got multiple rooms of games. It's great. So you can find me at KathleenMercury.com. I put all of my game design teaching resources there. In addition, you can find me on Twitter at Mercury with 7 M. So it's at Mercury if people want to get a hold of me. And I love working with teachers and educators all over the world when it comes to teaching game design and doing what I do, because it is the most fun job ever. And I think all kids deserve the chance to play better games and to learn how to design games.
Excellent. Right. Well, thank you again for joining me, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right, cool. Thanks, Paul.
So I hope you found the show useful. I certainly learned a few things from Kathleen which I want to try and put into practice more myself. If you have any other comments about the show, then please get in contact with me, either through the Board Game Geek Guild or through Facebook group or however really. And as I mentioned at the start, this podcast and a lot of the other content that I produce is only made possible through my Patreon campaign. So if you do enjoy my content and you want to support the show and help me continue to make more content, then please consider supporting me over at patreon.com. So a big thank you again to Kathleen for joining me on the show and giving up her time. Thanks very much for all of the questions that I had in advance. Thanks very much to Gameslaw, the UK's largest specialist games retailer at gameslaw.com. And thank you very much to Jason Shaw at audionautics.com for the music used in this podcast. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.